Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Rise Urban Nation. I got a special treat in the building today. My brother from the other mother, Mr. Jason Roberts, is in the building, ladies and you,
What's up,
everybody.
Terrell?
You don't know. This has been a long time coming. I've been hounding this guy at every single startup event. Even started going to his wife to get him on the episode, and we finally got him here. How are you doing, sir?
I am good, brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm trying to figure out when we first met. Could you re-jog about when did we first meet? Was it
We
before
first
Village Hub?
met. It was actually at a Village Up call that we did, or Zoom
Uh-huh.
call that we did. That's where we first met. That's where we first met.
Ah,
Was Village
okay.
Up? Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I also am on the board of Village Up. It's an initiative out here in good old sunny San Diego that helps underserved founders through their journey with resources, career development, community, et cetera, et cetera. Jason has written some very insightful articles. So if you want to check out more of his work, you can do it there as well. But Jason Roberts, enough about that. For the people who don't know Jason, let's start off like this. Who is Jason Roberts? Tell the people, let the people know.
I would say, Jason Roberts is a work in progress.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is I'm someone who's continuing to grow and continue to learn about me and those around me. I continue to try to grow and to be a great husband, a great father. I've got three amazing kiddos. Someone who is an honest and trustworthy friend. Someone who provides good counsel and mentorship. Um, I'm someone who just tries to be a better version of me
Mhm.
every day.
I like that.
Um, you know, sometimes I wake up and I fail that day, but failure is not a bad thing.
Hmm.
So when you say who is Jason Roberts, I think it's someone who has learned to, um, as I've kind of gotten a little bit older, learn to appreciate life,
Hmm.
learn to appreciate what's been given to me, enjoy it, and help others along the way. That's me.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Um, the journey. Life is about the journey, and I've been. You gave me a little bit of your bio and so forth before you came on, and I like just reading about your journey has been amazing, and to watch you build what you've built. I see how your journey has helped you kind of become the person you are to build what you built. Now start off with your early career, because you got your first job was out of college as a production facilitator with Johnson & Johnson. Tell me, about going, like, leaving college, getting into that, from where you're from, and,
Yeah,
and then how that journey started for you.
yeah, and I'm gonna take it maybe just a little bit further back, and that's because it ties into the story. So, as I was sharing with you earlier, I went to the University of Texas at Austin, Hookham,
Yeah.
and I thought I wanted to be an engineer, Tariel. I really did, and because when I was a kid, I was always taking stuff apart. My dad was big into math. My mom was a science teacher. So, it's kind of seemed okay, I like both of those fields. Engineering is where I need to be. But in college, I co-opted. So I worked for a year and
Mhm.
I got paid good money. I mean, so the
Right.
money was excellent. And it's one of those lessons early on. But I realized through that co-op, man, I can't do this. This isn't for me. I needed this that type of role. I needed, I was intern as like a metallurgical engineer and doing some stuff. Maintenance engineer was one semester. It was great work experience. But I realized that's not what I wanted to do. But I was so far along in my studies, do I really want to go and sacrifice another whole year or a year and a half? So I stuck with it, got a minor in business. But when I was leaving, I was looking for work that wasn't kind of the hardcore mechanical engineering work. So that's what
Mm.
led me to Johnson & Johnson, a company called Ethicon, which is one of their They've got tons of subsidiary companies, but it's a manufacturing facility. They make, if you've had any type of surgery, chances are the
Mm-hmm.
suture that they used to sew you up with was made in that plant in San Angelo, Texas, which is about 3.5 hours northwest of Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what led me there, because they wanted people who had an engineering background, but I wasn't doing the hardcore engineering work. In that
Mm-hmm.
role, I was actually right out of college, and I'm leading a production team, right? So I worked the second shift, which is like 11 to 8, 11 to 7, and I
Mm-hmm.
worked that second shift, and I had maybe about 25 people that were part of my production team, and we had our quotas and things that we needed to do to put out a certain number of sutures every day. But that was really my first job, my real first introduction into corporate America, and it was working in a production plant, and working alongside people and leading people. And when I look back on it, man, that was fantastic experience early on. I loved it. It
Mm-hmm.
was a challenge for us on the home front because we were so far away, right?
Yeah.
Ty and I had just welcomed in our first son too, right out of college. And you're so far
Woo!
away, so you didn't have that support system. Yeah, yeah. Tell me
Yeah.
about it. And it was not an easy practice. I had actually had the easy part. Ty had the hard part because she was on bed rest, from
Right.
like month 4 on. It was crazy, but it was a fantastic work experience, being an environment, and I drew from that experience, you know, all throughout my later career. But that was my first job.
Man, that your first job. You're managing the stress, and building relationships with the co-workers and the people to be this production facilitator, and you're also facilitating life too, like with your
Yeah.
wife and starting a new family. Man, like like what was the your mental status like? What did you have to become? Like, I feel like that's Superman stuff right there. Because I mean, we just went through COVID where people were losing their mind because their kids was at home, and you navigating a new job, a new baby, and all that. Like, what was like? I mean, how did you do that? Because like, I don't think people talk about that side enough. Like, what was that like, and what did you learn in your growth through that?
I think it kind of gets back to the upbringing, but it's a double-edged sword with that, and I'm going to talk about that later. Where the response is, man, you just got to roll them up.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta do what you gotta do. And so there were again, Ty was on bed rest. So I'm leaving work, on my break to go home, make sure she's good. Has dinner and things like that. Go back,
Mm-hmm.
to work, and then come back home later at night. You turn around, you
Mm-hmm.
do it again the next day. But in my family, my upbringing, there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't necessarily a lot of, and I'll talk about a lot of affection, a lot of I love yous and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. You know, it was, you model my behavior, which is you see me
Mm-hmm.
working all the time, and
Yeah.
so that's what I did. And just roll them up and work. But I will say this: I've been extremely fortunate, and we've been extremely fortunate that we've had people in our lives that will also provide support for us. So
Mm-hmm.
even when I was there, there was another facilitator who worked the first shift. His name was George Whale. He took me under his wing, took us under his wing. Tanya Harris, who was, kind of responsible for operations out there. She's a sister. She took good care of us too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I've always been lucky to be in a place, even though we're dealing with these things, these external stresses and stuff like that with family, we've
Mm-hmm.
had folks, right there with us to help. And even the people who I worked with. I mean, one of
Yeah.
the best baby shower I've ever had. I mean, was
Nice.
out there. To this day, I still have the sombrero that they gave me, my team. So we've been very fortunate. So it wasn't just all me, or it wasn't just all Ty. We've had
Mhm.
people helping us along the way, and it wasn't just true out there in San Angelo, Texas, way back then.
Yeah, nice, nice. I love that you have a great support system around you. And I often found in my career too, like having a great support system, really helps keeps you grounded, like in certain
Yes.
things, especially when you have to make tough decisions. Who grounds you when you have to make tough decisions?
Whew, man, that is a great question. I think what grounds me is kind of my, not necessarily a who as much as it is a what.
Mm,
And it would be value system, right?
mm,
And I think that's evolved, by the way, over the years when I compare my current self versus my younger self and what
mm,
you value then versus what you value now. You start to realize when you've gone through some things,
mm,
what's important. So as I look and I try to make important decisions or things that will have a ripple effect, that will carry over, decisions that you just can't take lightly.
mm,
I come back to a value system, right?
mm,
And one thing I've noticed is that it's from where I was to where I'm now. It's a lot less materialistic. Um,
mm,
it's a lot less self-centered,
mm,
and it's I think a lot more grounded in purpose and not achieving things, but more like process. So
mm,
being honest, being um, being someone who is a good listener, providing good counsel.
mm,
Those types of values, right? Um, Helping others versus trying to acquire certain things, whether that's in
mm,
status or in product or in material, you know. So it's less of a who, right?
mm,
I do seek, prayers. I do pray and seek that kind of counsel too. But I would say I'm more spiritual than deeply religious, which is how I was raised. Was deeply
mm.
religious, you know. But for the most part, it's guided by, and I'm not perfect,
Yeah.
right? We all stumble, but I
Mm-hmm.
try to stay to a value system.
Yeah, I love that on so many different levels, and I connect with that in so many different levels with you. I consider myself a spiritual person as well. I'm not a religious person because I don't follow any one religion, but I've taken pieces of the religions that have been you know, uh, installed in me from auntie, from grandma to mom,
Right.
from all these different religions, and use that to help mold and shift my value system to fit the things that I feel are the best parts of each of these things that were given to me to help guide and live my life. So thank you for sharing that. Now, in this, I mean, there's so much to unpack here. Let's start with this: the journey of really implementing those value systems. For me, the how was these experiences in life, from a corporate job to upbringing to what I've learned along the way, helped me really refine that. So and I think a lot of people are in their journey and they're trying to figure out the how, like how, and they're probably listening to you like, man, like, yeah, I get that, Jason. Like, yes, values really help, and these are the values I've had now. But like, how do I get there? Like, how did you get there? How did you get to this destination of these are the values? This is what's going to help me get to this next level of success, and
Hmm.
not the values that I see here. Because sometimes we often get sidetracked by the values of like, oh, the American dream and the corporate hustle and so forth, right? So, and I think you could speak pretty well because you had
As
many
my
levels to
aunties
your
would say,
career.
yes, Lord.
Yeah, testimony. So, I mean,
Testimony right
how
there.
did
Yeah.
you get there? I mean, because you somebody who's been through the corporate hustle, tell us about that journey. For what was it like for you, and how did you get there? Like, give us the how, the background.
It's I think there's two things. One is life events
Yeah,
that forced me to reset, forced
like,
me to reevaluate. And then two are strong mentors in my life who share with me their experience, their learning, who I love the concept. If you've ever heard of the concept of radical candor, I'm sure you've probably
Mm,
heard of that.
love that.
Who gave me that radical candor feedback,
Mm-hmm.
right? So let's tackle if let's just tackle let's tackle the first one, life events. And as I think back, the first really one that hit me when I was in corporate America was when I lost my dad, right?
Mm,
And it wasn't just losing him, right? It was the manner in which I lost him, right? To suicide, right?
mm-hmm.
And here is someone who was the epitome of strength to me coming up. Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get a whole bunch of I love you, but this dude never stopped. He was always working. He was so highly respected in any circle he stepped in, and literally a math genius. He
Mm-hmm.
was um, he was the first to get a PhD in mathematics from Texas A&M University, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which says a lot when you're doing that down the South, right? And but he was so well respected and still is to this day in so many different circles. And he worked so hard. But here is this person who was the epitome of strength to me
Mm-hmm.
and meant so much to me
Mm-hmm.
that, he took his own life,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it didn't set into me later, like to really dig into the why. It just, that moment, it was February 13th, 2006. Um, it's the day that it happened. And later that year, literally October that year, I left consulting, right? Um, so I left consulting because it made forced me to be like, what kind of person do I want to be when I get older, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew then that up until that point, because it'd been bred in me, you just work, 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 and I was going to be a partner. I was going to be a partner, and and I got into early promotion to analyst, and the next night, or consultant, manager, and that stuff. But I realized I don't want to live that lifestyle, on the road so much because I was already starting to experience the stress that put on my home life too. And it was that event that forced me to reset. Now is the time for you to start to move in a different direction and start to reassess what's important.
Mm.
And also at that time, um, one of the partners I worked for, Paul Equali, I remember that conversation that we had.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he talked to me about his value system. Now he was a partner, but because I asked him, how do you do it? And he walked through some of his values. But at the end of the day, I recognize that for me, I envision too much of a cost to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So that life event forced me to get out of consulting, go a different path.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was probably the first piece. But again, Paul was one who talked to me about values. And as we bring up later stories, I'll tell you some other mentors, lifelong mentors, who gave
Mm-hmm.
me real feedback that in some cases, I didn't even realize what they were saying at first until other traumatic events happened in my life. I was like, now I get what you were saying. But I've had folks
Mm.
that have tried to help direct me, and then life events like that one um, help shape how I view things.
Yeah.
And not to skip too far ahead, I can go to something more recently. We'll dive into that one later. What I think the probably the latest big life event was having a stroke at 42 years old. I think that will
Oh
do it
wow.
for you yeah, um, when something like that happens to you, you're forced to reassess, and that
Mm-hmm.
was kind of the last straw
Yeah,
for me.
and I think this starts to get us into that conversation of what you alluded to a little bit earlier. That here's your dad who is this metaphor of strength, and then oftentimes in the Black community we associate strength with being strong and not acknowledging our mental health in certain ways, right? um
Yes, yes, yes,
and 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 this actually doesn't at least to me, I don't think it strengthens us, it cripples us. Like when you think about, do you think, you know your religion or culture or some other aspect of your identity or background influences how you think about mental health, and if so, how?
Hmm. I think, I've come full circle on how I think about it, just being honest. I was one of those folks who used to think, back in the day, man, that's kind of a sign of weakness. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like, you don't talk like that. You don't share, because of how I guess I was programmed in a sense of how I viewed what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be um, the caretaker for your family, or what it meant to be the provider and things like that. You don't talk that way, and or let alone let something known that you're not feeling right. People
mm-hmm,
think something's going on, like you're crazy and stuff like that. So that was the mindset back then, right?
mm-hmm,
And I also think that we have been raised and taught to think that and don't listeners don't take this the wrong way, but I'm just speaking my truth, right? That prayer is the end all and be all. If you just do that, everything is going to be okay. And that's not true, right? It's absolutely helpful, but there is no substitute for getting in the room and talking with somebody who is a trained professional that can help you. But I think, especially like you were talking about in our community, just asking for help sometimes is viewed as a source of weakness, or can be viewed that way. Let alone you're going to talk about some mental health. What? Are you crazy? And it's just not the case. The truth, the good thing is in today's day and age versus, you know, 10, 20 years ago, it's becoming a lot more acceptable now. Because you know why, Terrell?
mm-hmm.
We're having this kind of conversation,
Yeah.
you know? And as long as we keep having this conversation, which is why, I'm glad we are, because you never know who that might touch. I was telling you about, the we were at the Black UT alumni weekend this
Mm-hmm,
past weekend in Austin, and I had this conversation with a friend of mine from 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, and he told me, so you know what, we were meant to have this conversation
mm-hmm,
because he's dealing with a suicide event himself,
mm,
right? And it's just something that I think we need to embrace more as a community. Mental health is not a sign of weakness. Being
mm-hmm.
vulnerable to me is a superpower. And we just need to do a lot more. But I think if it would have been more acceptable back in 2006
Mm-hmm.
for the provider, the man, to go and talk with someone, my dad would still be here today.
Yeah, yeah. And this is even a more timely conversation because it's Mental Health Awareness Month. Um, and to comment real quick on something that you said about the Black community when we talk about, oh, prayer is going to fix everything. As my grandma used to say, faith without works is dead, and so prayer without works is dead too. So, so you have to
Yeah,
put in the work
exactly.
as well. And that's us
You got
talking
to.
about it, getting the resources that we need. I think there is a complexity to mental health in the Black community, as I mean, if anything that COVID has taught us, there's a complexity in mental health in the U.S. altogether. But even there's another nuance to me that I think there is it in the Black community of the one we don't talk about it, right, aspect, and two, um, the strength aspect for Black men is we 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 don't talk about our mental health, our weakness, and so forth because of the way we maneuver in the streets. Like, so, like, you don't want that business getting out there because now it could be used against you, and you gotta
Yes,
you
you.
gotta hold
Yeah,
up an appearance, right?
yeah.
and,
You got to be
and
hard.
yeah, you gotta be hard. You can't be soft. You can't be weak because of, if you're growing up in a rough environment, that is the only shield you have, right? To this
Hmm.
persona that you're strong, you're tough, and this, that, and the other, to get through and survive, right? And when we're in that survival state of mindset, it's hard to get to the other side of wellness and mental health and all that stuff. Um, Coming out of that, I know you've probably had some great mechanisms to help you get out of that, reframe, reshift. So, what are, let's say, what are three things that you do for your mental health on a daily basis to keep it in check? Because it sounds like you
Mm,
had that awakening, right? And
yeah,
maybe it's something that we can do internally before we do, externally with community to help our mental health. And I'm assuming you have something that you do. What are those three things that you do for your mental health on a daily basis to keep it in check?
gotcha. Yeah. Well, one thing, it's not on a daily basis, but one thing that I do have is I have a therapist, right?
Mm.
And is someone started seeing shortly after my stroke.
Yeah.
And
Now
when I
let me pause right there. You having a saying this and also being okay with it, that's I want to applaud you for that, because a lot of black men that would never even say that right out loud, would even
Yeah,
never entertain an idea of seeing a therapist because of how we ingrained in our culture. Like, we don't go see therapists, right? I don't know. Was,
right,
was that
right.
something that
Yeah,
you had to get over? And if so, how did you get over that?
I think it was something to get over the stigma, but I think for me, that having that personal story, excuse me, with my dad,
Mm-hmm.
right? I It touched me firsthand,
Mm.
and that I knew how I was feeling, Terrell,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that if I didn't check that kind of that emptiness and that loneliness, um, that kind of lost feeling, I knew I saw firsthand what that looked like, you know, to the extreme. And so that, I think, is what helped me get over that
Mm.
hump, to just go and see someone and talk with someone. And it was in that process, man, that I'm telling you, man, she helped me immensely. And like I said, I started off with, who is Jason? I'm a work in progress. We're all work in progresses, Um, but she helped me really understand me, right?
Mm.
And understand, some of the traumatic things that happen throughout your life. Sometimes it's not like one major event. It could be small events over the, your time as a kid, your time
Mm-hmm.
in early childhood, that you
Mm-hmm.
don't even realize is programming you, right?
Mm.
And why do I do the things that I do? And then you
Mm.
start to realize, oh, that's why I do some of the things that I do. Thank you, right? Um, so it was with her help that really provided um, a pathway to self discovery and self awareness that simply did not exist there before.
Mm.
Um, and having that self awareness has helped me deal with later traumatic events,
Mm-hmm.
right? Has helped me deal with the setbacks that you have going into entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
It's helped me deal with, and actually help other people too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's one way I got over the hump, was just my own personal experience. But one thing that I do, it's not daily, but it's something I have, is my therapist. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
have, you hear the analogy all the time. A lot of people have uh, physical trainers,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, you have, a doctor's going to help you with your, if you got bad knees,
Yeah.
right? But it's all from a point of healing and getting better. It's no different than with mental health and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So that's one thing. The other thing I really started to get into, and it's not necessarily daily, but I try to do that, is meditation.
Mm.
Is And there is a good book that talks about meditation. It's called Psycho Cybernetics, and it talks about how you use meditation to reprogram, not to get into too much science, your servo mechanisms, which is innate in you. So we all have, you know, our unconscious mind that is programmed a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not careful, that mind can be programmed to negative things, or it can be programmed to positive things. But through
Mm.
meditation, you can start to reaffirm self-image. You can start to set your goals and see yourself doing those types of things. So meditation is one thing I do to help. And then the last is, three. If I say three things, try to stay in shape. I have
Mm-hmm.
found personally that when I am in good physical shape,
Mm-hmm.
my mental state is better, right? My decision making is better. There's more clarity of thought. I just seem to be more quick, more decisive. So for me, I prioritize, try to, didn't do much of it this past weekend, to tell the truth. But, but, you know, prioritizing my physical health. And now wellness, it's a topic for a different day. It's so much more than just physical. It's your emotional, your social. There's so many different aspects of wellness that I try to
Mm-hmm.
make sure I stay in tune with. Reach out to friends, stay connected with other people. Uh, it's so helpful to talk other people through their challenges.
Mm.
That I found that to be helpful. So
Mm-hmm.
if I were to say three things, it'd be, you know, those three: um, therapist, meditation, and kind of prioritizing my physical health and being a sounding board for other people too.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. All three of those things are very tangible things that people can implement into their regimen. If not one, all three. And I think it makes a big difference. I think I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, because I go see a therapist as well, and I told him, look, how would your life be different if you felt better? Because there was like all these
Hmm.
things that were just they were not feeling good about, right?
Yeah.
In regards to their mental health and loneliness and anxiety and anxiousness and all this other things. And I was like, how would your life be different if you felt better? And if the question
Hmm.
is, the answer is outstanding, overwhelmingly, my life would be so much better, or my life would be better, even just the 1%. Wouldn't it be worth the time and investment to seek out the things that can help your life, help you feel better in your life? I don't know if that makes sense to you, but like that's how
It
I
makes
kind of
perfect sense.
address it.
There is a saying. There was a saying. You know, you don't find your way to happiness.
Mhm,
Happiness is the way. So what I hear in what you just said is, making that conscious decision to be happy, right? Making that conscious decision um, to, uh, not say if I get this, then I will be happy, right? But to actually,
mhm,
it's a mindset shift in so many different ways. But we all need help getting there sometimes, right?
mhm,
And that's why mental health is so important, and being vulnerable and sharing, stories like you just shared your story,
mhm.
is so impactful.
Yeah. I also, in this journey of mine, I found that sometimes wellness, to allude to the many aspects of wellness that you speak of, um, when I'm unbalanced and not paying attention to different aspects of my wellness, I get a little imbalanced. Do you feel that, one, is that the same for you? Do you feel that way as well? That's true when people are imbalanced in certain aspects of their life. That's when they start having issues in one area or the other when it comes to wellness or mental health. And then part two of the question is, do you feel that your life is appropriately balanced between work, fun, friends, family, self-care, exercise, and other meaningful pursuits?
Hmm, great question. Um, so to the first one, absolutely, I get imbalanced, unbalanced from time to time, and I can feel it. Like if I haven't been like I said, I prioritize kind of the physical side too. If I haven't been working out, I feel it, and I can sense the difference. If I, let's say, if I, miss some, meditation, I can start to feel the difference.
Mhm.
So, and if I haven't talked to, friends in a while, I feel the difference. Whenever I talk to some of my buddies, call me, or I'll call them. It's rejuvenating, right? It's
Mhm.
rejuvenating. It's to talk with people, and that's I forget the stat, man. I was so shocked by how many people uh, feel that they don't have a single friend that they could call,
Mm.
right? See if I can look that up. Maybe it's something we can include later on.
Mhm.
But you know, when I feel unbalanced, that's when I know it's time to pick up the phone. It's time to,
Mhm.
you know, I don't really go to the gym. I can go into the garage, right? Or just do something quick, 30 minutes, or just make sure today, you know, before your head hits that pillow, make sure you meditate.
Mhm.
You know, so
Yeah.
I absolutely do get unbalanced. I feel it. I think, but it's again, it's I'm at a much better place now where you're self aware and you can kind of self correct and keep it pushing.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and then what was the second question you'd asked me?
I
Terrell, you
think
asked me a second question. It was,
do you, yeah. So the second question, where you kind of alluded to it, like, do you
okay.
know, uh, in reference to, do you keep balance with, your family, friends, and so forth? And you talked about it in the self
Oh
correction and
yeah,
so
yeah,
forth. So yeah, so
yeah.
you're right
But
on
it's still
par.
it's
You're
it's
right on par.
yeah, and now it's a little bit easier from a family standpoint because we've got two that are out of the house now. We got our youngest who's still in the house, so still trying to balance and give him the time he needs, Tyler the time that she needs. It's always a work in progress. You'll hear me say that several times. It's always
Mhm.
a work in progress, but the key is to be self-aware and to know that it's something that needs to be done.
That, um, I wanted to ask you a question because I work with young people. You have young ones that you're raising, and you work with young people. You deal with careers and so forth. And something that I seen a study the other day that talked about mental health is on the and suicide is at its highest rate since the pandemic amongst young people. Um, and
Second
it
leading
was,
cause of death.
yeah, and I found that
Yeah.
very alarming. In your experience, how are mental health issues affecting young people?
Wow. Um, I think it's affecting how they view themselves and their, confidence in themselves and being comfortable in their own skin.
Hmm.
I think as you brought up the younger generation, I think they have challenges that Terrell we simply did not have coming up. You
Hmm.
know, with social media, and there was I remember reading this. It was so on point in a book that talked about how social media is an ill from that standpoint because all you see are all the positive images, all the good side. So people are led to believe you and I being older can discern, right?
Hmm.
And we know, okay, they're only presenting the picture they want you to see, you know?
Hmm.
We all know that there's things underneath the surface, right? It's superficial. Kids
Hmm.
don't necessarily get that, right? And so they're being raised to think that if I don't achieve that look, if I don't achieve that status, then I am a failure, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I think in so many different ways, I do believe that, and now you got bullying, like that type of stuff that's happening
Hmm.
through social. I think that has absolutely played a role in this because truth of the matter is we as adults have had to deal with it. Like we, man, you see somebody
Yeah.
else, man, they look really successful. Man, I need to up my game. Imagine if you are a,
Hmm.
a 13-year-old, right? And they're seeing it constantly being pushed with these images. So I think that might be one of the, you know, um, driving factors here is that they're being presented with unrealistic images, and when they're
Mm,
measuring themselves up against that, it's contributing to, depression, anxiety, which are the
mm,
precursors to suicide. So
yeah.
that'd be my kind of take
I
on that with the younger
Yeah,
generation.
I'm glad you touched on the social media and the technology piece because I often, that there's often conversation around that and a lack of awareness and understanding for a lot of people around that. Now, just to elaborate more and get some more concrete ideas from you, like when you think about that, how do certain mental health conditions like depression affect how, young people engage with technology or just people in general engage with technology?
Hmm. Um,
Is it
I would say, I think if make sure I'm following the question. So the question is like, if someone is in that state, like how is that relationship with technology?
yeah, like how
Is that
does
how you would phrase
mental
it,
health
Terrell?
yeah, yeah, I think that's how I would phrase it and really speaking to like um with technology and everything, how does that really affect people's mental health and depression? Like, is it a dopamine type of effect, or is like what is it
Gotcha.
about the technology piece and from whether from your experience or your understanding that really gets them into this depression mode or starts to affect the mental health? You alluded to some of it when you talk about keeping up with the Joneses, but like just to elaborate more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a natural tendency sometimes, if someone were to, put a post out, are people really liking my content and things like that? Are you getting likes and that type of stuff? And I have, seen that with the younger generation with kids, where, I got 1,000 likes or I got this, right? So I think it's affecting them where they gauge success based on what the technology or what it is telling them
Mm,
success looks like, right? And it gets back to my earlier conversation on value system. It's
yeah,
still very materialistic driven and not grounded in, kind of values and things of that nature. To me, that's what, well, not all, I'm not saying trash in social media, but I think certain aspects of it falls into, you know, that boat. So I would think that in terms of how they use technology, it's used now as kind of a source of validation, right? And
yeah,
so I'm gonna put out things to get that validation that I am important, to get that validation that people do like me, those types of things. I think that's how that technology is being used. But I think there's steps that are being made. You've heard about time controls and things like that getting missed. Hey, you've been on here for so many hours, right? Um, that kind of stuff. But I think a lot more should and probably will be done on that front as it relates to kind of technology and the relationship it has, particularly with the younger generation, and from
mm,
a some of the negative ramifications it can have.
nah,
Hopefully, that
no,
answered your question there.
no, that answers my question a lot. And like I said, thank you again for just being open to having this discussion. Like, this is a much needed and timely discussion, like I said, and I think we should create more spaces to have this discussion. And hopefully we can continue discussion, even outside of this platform. And I don't know how we're gonna do it,
Right.
but we're gonna figure out how to make it happen. I'm
Let's make it
curious to
happen.
know too. Yeah, I'm curious to know too. Like, since this has been a journey for you, what is the most important thing that you learned about your mental health this year?
You're bringing up so the most important thing I learned about my mental health this year.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say the most important thing that I learned is, hmm, it may be reinforcing something I've come to learn is that at the end of the day, right? Um, no matter what happens, I am responsible. Okay, and and just bear with me.
Hmm.
I'm responsible. I might not be at fault for my circumstances, but I'm responsible for them. Okay.
Mm.
And the subtle difference, I'm making there, and there's a book. It's called The Subtle Art, not the curse on your show. I'm going to say The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by
Hmm.
Mark Manson. Have you read it?
No, but I've heard of the book.
Yeah, okay. And he talks in that book, he talks about this concept of responsibility and fault, right? And one thing I think that's been reinforced for me, this year from the mental health standpoint is that no matter what the circumstances are, you're responsible for your current situation and how you respond to it, you know?
Mm,
And so, I mean, and sometimes, it could be tragic. I mean, tragedy has hit you hard. Um, but what I've come to learn and reinforce this year is that at the end of the day, I'm responsible with
hmm
how I respond, right? No matter
mm,
how dire it may seem. And it gets to that my earlier point about there is no way to like happiness is this end destination. It is
hmm
the way, right? Which gets
hmm
to is how you view your circumstances and let that guide you versus the alternative, of course, is victimhood, right?
hmm
I am the victim, right, of
hmm
said circumstance, right? And which just leads to a spiral. And that's where having a trained therapist, they can help you focus on you, right, and help you
hmm
see, uh, kind of help you see that different perspective I'm talking about. Is so useful because trying to get to that point on your own is extremely hard.
hmm Yeah, it is. It is, and we all need support. And I think that's the biggest thing, the biggest notion that social media, sometimes even growing up in the environments we grew up, is that I did it. I did it by myself, and you gotta pick yourself up by the
Right.
bootstraps, and you got ain't nobody coming out here to help you, right? Like, or don't look for help
Yeah.
from nobody. Be a man up, do it yourself, and then these type of things, which takes us into the spiral, and then you know having conversations like this help us see that no, there's no strength in that. The strength is
Yeah.
asking for help. The strength is
Yep.
getting support. The better thing to do is protect your mental health at all costs. Um,
Right.
uh, I talked to a young lady last week who's in the mental health and wellness space, and she told me that uh, rest and mental health is restorative and revolutionary. Mm, I felt that.
Yes.
Rest is restorative and
Yes.
revolutionary.
That is so
So
true.
take care of your mental health.
Hmm.
So much power in that
You
statement.
have to.
Um, yeah, you have to.
Because like I think I read somewhere
So
one in five people deal with challenges on that front at some point. One in five. So
yeah,
it's a big chunk of folks.
that. Now, I want to. I mean, you could probably talk about mental health all day long, and I want to
Yeah.
reserve some of the time in our episode to kind of, talk about the amazing stuff that you're also doing in your career and your entrepreneurship journey. Um, so I'm a journey real quick into the business side of things. Tell me a little bit about your business, what you do, Frontline Careers. I know this is your baby, and you've been doing some amazing things with this. Tell us a little bit about Frontline Careers. What is it? What do you do, and how do you do it?
Gotcha. So, um, Frontline Careers is we're San Diego County based startup, and our mission is to connect frontline workers who are looking for more with companies that offer more. And by frontline workers, Terrell, what I'm talking about are the men and women who have to be present to do their jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And other kind of hourly positions that are often overlooked, undervalued, underappreciated. That's what we're talking about when we talk about frontline. workers. And so the way we do that is primarily two ways: is we focus on workplace culture, but specifically frontline. So we have our own proprietary assessment. We call it Frontline Friendly, and it's based largely on anonymous feedback from current employees, only frontline employees. All right. So we don't talk with, the VPs, the directors, corporate folks, because in my experience, that experience is way different than the front end, the front line.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll talk about that in a second. So with our frontline friendly assessment, we then come in and we get to the truth, or make it more transparent what it's like to work at this particular business or company if you are indeed a frontline worker. And then based on that feedback from, again, anonymously from those current frontline employees, we then determine is this a frontline friendly company or not. If they are, they're certified as frontline friendly, um, which then lets job seekers, customers, and even investors, because I'll touch on that too. The investment community is starting to get more and more, conscious about where those dollars go. Lets those external parties know that you really do care about your people. The other thing we do is we have an exclusive job site. So what that is only jobs that are offering more than just pay. So you're offering certain types of perks, benefits to your front line. The whole theme here is providing more. That's what we're about. We're San Diego based, San Diego County based. We just had our first, not our first assessment, but we had our first certification. So
Nice.
a small company in Vista, called Little Cakes Cupcake Kitchen. They're now our official frontline friendly certified company. We have some more companies entering the assessment queue, and then hopefully, some of them will be able to earn our certification as well. So that's what we do, and it's focused on our vision is to real one day every frontline worker will work for a frontline friendly company. That's our vision,
Mm.
right? And we're going to keep doing what we're doing, and over time, we will eventually get there.
Yeah,
Um,
and I was going to say, I think this is the perfect time
Go
for
ahead.
companies to reimagine the world of work and what it can look like for frontline workers. If anything, COVID taught us that we have work to do, we could do better, and there's a want and a need for it, and a responsibility to the company as well. And then when they start to really invest in that, they can get better results.
Exactly, exactly. You get that discretionary efforts. That's a thing I like to point out. So and so along the lines of what you just said, I mean, it's COVID actually accelerated the shift. It started
Mm-hmm.
pre-COVID though, right? And there was a subtle change where the Business Roundtable, this is like August 2019,
Mm-hmm.
where they updated the stated purpose of corporations to also now include, right, the employees, right, and their well-being. That was a
Mm-hmm.
huge shift. So it's not just about profits; it's about serving your employees and the communities in which they live, right? So that was a huge shift, and that happened prior to COVID because I think business started to recognize we got to do something. We have a brewing problem here, and if we don't push back on the investment community, the traditionally, hey, it's all about profit earnings quarter to quarter to quarter. If we don't do something to give ourselves some air cover, we're gonna have some significant people issues. Okay, I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe they thought we had a much longer runway to address that. Then COVID hits, boom, right? And
Mm-hmm.
now frontline workers and generally, actually, workers in general, not just frontline, have started to realize their value, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when I realize my value and start demanding more, we want to make it easier for them to find that more. And over time, as companies see, okay, where is the talent going? Why aren't we there? We can help them, right? So we're not here
Mm-hmm.
to hammer on people, right? We're also here to help. So through our assessments, we help companies understand their shortcomings, because employees going directly to their employer are going to be honest all the time, right? This is anonymous. We're going to help them uncover across our 8 dimensions where their areas for improvement or growth are and help them there.
Yeah, and I think this also your work also ties into your personal journey in some ways because also employees start to realize what wellness is for them. And so it was no longer about, I'm just going to go to work, collect a check. I need something that allows me to be well, in whatever that looks like for me. And that means I need an organization that cares about people over profits, right?
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
even if companies put people first, they will see profits increase, because then people will innately do more to help the company be successful than just to do the bare minimum just to get through and survive the workday, right? So there's a
Exactly.
correlation between wellness and doing better, not only for the personal side but for the business side as well.
Absolutely. And there was a correlation between kind of my personal journey and this where we are today. That was actually the genesis um, behind the idea. And I was I just had a thought, man. Sorry. Hang on. Um, we were talking about the personal journey and the darn it.
Well, tell me about the personal journey that helped you come to this genesis of starting the company, because I think that'll help tie it all together for folks.
Yeah. I think so. If I think about the personal journey, that was it. Sorry, I got it now. Um, and I told you about the stroke, right? There was a
Yeah.
lot of stress leading up to that. I think part of that was a misalignment in my value system with what I was experiencing firsthand, right? So
Hmm.
I moved out of a corporate environment, got promoted, asked to come out here in Southern California, run operations. And that's when I saw firsthand how frontline workers were being treated, right? And I'm not saying that's indicative of the entire company or things like that, but where I was at, right, I saw how workers were treated, the lack of dignity, the lack of respect, right, and so forth. And so that didn't sit well with me. But I could see, like, and going back to managing to quarters and things like that, never was it asked, how are the people doing, right?
Hmm.
And so I then moved into another role. Again, still managing frontline operations. This time I had like 9 different plants around Southern California. Same story. And I think it was that stress, along with just the stress of work, and I was also, this is another conversation for another time, trying to be somebody else's first black, VP of operations and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, I was wearing other people's expectations and the weight of that. All that culminated in that stroke, I believe.
Hmm.
So I knew then I had to make a change. And so, long story short, it was literally, Terrell, probably less than 6 months after that, I had a chance to hear Mike Rowe speak.
Hmm.
Okay. The guy that did the show Dirty Jobs.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how, as a group of business leaders, how we have to put more emphasis on skilled trades, those roles within our companies, that they are important roles and they need greater investment and greater support. And that was the genesis. When I heard that message, I knew I didn't feel right where I was at. I knew I didn't want to stay there. um, and the idea hit me, based on the conversations I already had with tons of folks that work within my organization at that point. Um, I knew, highly motivated, highly talented, just needed investment. Why not make it easier for frontline workers? Again, many men and women who I had met who were extremely talented and motivated, to find companies who would reciprocate that, and their investment. That get it like you can.
Hmm.
And I like to say it's not necessarily people over profit, it's people and profit. They're
Mm.
both, they're not mutually exclusive. And that's the
Mm.
trap that we fall into. Um, there's a, I famed biopsychologist, Stanford, Michael Pfeiffer, who talks about, that very, very subject. Another one, if you haven't read a book, it's a great book, Good Job Strategy by Zen Upton. Excellent book. But they talk about how even some of these low-cost companies who are providing low-cost goods still pay well and outperform their peers. Why? Because they prioritize their people, right? So they got the profits too. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
like I'm saying I'm putting my people over my profit, right? It's people and profit. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're about. It's helping companies find ways where their employees prosper and they're going to prosper too. They are
Mm-hmm.
not mutually exclusive. And that was a vision. And when I heard him speak, I could see it, right? And so that's when I called Ty. She was call number one. And then I called our other co-founder, Ari, who is an IO psychologist, is like right up his wheelhouse. And that was the genesis behind the idea, you know. And that was 2018. I left. I left there in 2020, right before the pandemic. And
Yeah, I must say you are a brave man to leave a company and start a business right before the pandemic.
I wish I could have seen it coming, but I probably still would have done it anyway. I was so convinced, and I still am convinced, Terrell, this is the right way. This is where the industry is going.
Mm-hmm.
This is There's greater emphasis now just on not just any job, but the quality of jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's job quality. It matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you're seeing, I think the last jobs report, there's like 11 million open positions right now, right?
Wow.
Um, there are influences that there's other external factors, immigration policy, some things like that have influenced it. But there is no denying the fact that some of those open positions are because folks are saying, you know what? No, I'm not going back to that. I'm gonna trade in for something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And until what we're doing gets out there and becomes the norm, I think we're going to continue to see this problem.
Yeah. I love the whole framework you just gave, and then also the fact that people and profits. So thank you for updating that. It doesn't have to be people over profits. It's people and profits. They both can be mutually exclusive. I love that. Love that. Love that. Thank you for correcting me on that. You're gonna inspire somebody. I know somebody's gonna get inspired by this episode when they listen to it. And so what I want to do is talk a little bit about your journey from transitioning out of the corporate world into entrepreneurship. What was that like for you, and what would you say were the steps that you kind of took to do that? Because I think there's some people who get don't who get inspired by other people's journey in that, and they want to learn how people were able to do that. Like, what would you say was the important steps for you to be able to do that transition, especially right before a pandemic?
I tell you what, this step started many, many years before. And here's what I mean by that is corporate America prepared me for it,
Oh wow.
right? When I look back at, now, it had its challenges, absolutely. Um, but my very first role, the very first role I saw frontline operations. I started on the front line in that production plant I was telling you about. I ended on the front line, in the waste industry. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but those experiences prepared me
Yeah.
for entrepreneur. As we're getting started, Terrell, I'm rolling up my sleeves and I'm coding. Okay.
Wow.
So, yeah, I'm coding, right. So, but where did I learn those skills? I had to brush it off. I had to go take a couple of, Coursera courses, but I learned that from my time in consulting. I
Mm-hmm.
was a tip code developer, right? So JavaScript, right? Learn Java. And some of the skills you don't quite forget them, right? But I was more on the technical systems integration side before I moved over to the kind of business consulting side of it. So I leveraged that experience, right? Um, that experience. I left consulting, like I said. Then I moved into risk management, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was in the natural gas asset trading um, company, small company.
Mm-hmm.
But through there, I really learned about assessing risk. project management, things like that. So my point in all that, Terrell, is, and then even when I moved into the waste business, I was afforded the opportunity to work with billing, right? To work with shared services, right? Procurement, before then eventually running a smaller business within a large business. So I was an entrepreneur, is what I like to say.
Mm-hmm.
All that varied experience, I think, prepared me well for making that leap. I had to make sure my finances were in order, because those aren't just readily available for us, So to make sure my finances were in order, and I had that alignment with my family. And as you know, Ty is integrally involved,
Mm-hmm.
in spearheading so much. So having all those things together was what prepared me, I think, to make that leap. We're by no means a glowing success yet, but I tell you, we will be.
Yeah.
And I think part of it was that preparation. So I remember vividly having conversations, and I'm sorry to go off on a tangent here a little bit. Um, some of my friends, right, because who are black, especially as a black man, I'm sure, and I've talked to black women too. Corporate America was not a very welcoming environment, right? You don't feel like you belong, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I remember having these conversations. I would hear all the time, man, corporate America ain't for me.
Mm-hmm.
Corporate America ain't for me, right? And one of the projects I'm working on is a book called "Corporate America Is Not for Me," but the not is crossed out because it is for you. Focus on the learning though. Learn what you can get, make that move. Learn a little bit more, make that move. Learn a little bit more, make that move. Now you're ready, go. Right? But you're learning on someone else's dime.
Yeah, I love that analogy because it makes people reframe their corporate career, and look at your corporate career as an apprenticeship to your entrepreneurship journey,
Yes, yes,
because
exactly.
you can learn so much along the way. Like I have one gentleman who went straight into entrepreneurship after college, and when I used to do consulting with him, he's like, "How'd you learn all this?" I was like, "Oh, from my last job or from my last job." He's like, "Man, I wish now I had the fortitude and the patience to work a 9 to 5 like you did, so that I could learn some of these things in my business."
Yeah. But the fortitude comes from your goal. You know
Mhm,
what your end game is, right?
mhm,
And that's just a means to get there to help improve your likelihood of success, right? Um, and so it's you're not saying I'm committed to doing this 9 to 5, always moving at someone else's beckoning will, like we want you to go do this and go do that. No, I'm still in control. This whole time, I'm in control. I know what I want to learn. And you won't, I've had this kind of mentoring conversation, Terrell, so many times. Like, man, it's what just focus on the learning. Focus on the
mhm.
learning. Get it. Because once you got it, it can't be taken away. And you will
Mhm.
be able to leverage that in so many different ways down the road. There's no better training ground than corporate America. And that's how
Mhm.
we need to see it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, to that being said, don't let your corporate experience get in the way of your education. There's a lot to
Yes.
learn.
Yes. There's a whole lot to learn. And don't feel dejected because there's moments where you absolutely will, you know. Keep your eye on the
Hey,
prize.
so now, let's do this. Let's wrap up like this because I like to keep my podcast episodes of drive time, and I feel like
Okay.
we could turn this into a Joe Rogan podcast, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
if I have
Sorry, brother. I can
the
get a little
star
long-winded.
power. Yeah, no offense to you. We had a lot of great stuff to talk about,
Yeah.
and me, I want to ask you more questions, but I was like, oh man, I don't know if we can make it a 2 hour podcast, but so let's do this. Uh, One, I'm gonna ask you 2 questions. The
Okay.
one question I want to ask you: what do you think the future has in store for your industry and what you're building? What does that look like? And then, especially when you see for the Black community, what could this do? Because it's what could this do for us in the future?
That's perfect. I think I kind of touched on a little bit earlier when I was talking about the um, quality jobs.
Yeah.
There is a shift. So I think when we talk about our industry, there is a shift to greater focus on the quality of jobs. You're
Mm-hmm.
seeing now, I've had conversations with, brothers who are working for, let's say in hospitality, and he's walking me through, man, here are all the stuff that we're doing now at Four Seasons. Man, this is the new things they're rolling out, not just to me, but to all our employees, right? So I think you're going to start seeing and hearing more of that because companies are realizing we got to provide more. So I think that bodes well for our community because the truth of the matter is, although we're maybe 13.5% of the U.S. population is talking black at this point, um, we're overrepresented in many of these frontline industries, retail, um, so like retail, transportation, grocery, those types of industries, you will find that we are overrepresented. So
Mm-hmm.
as there is a shift to greater quality of jobs on the front line, it's going
Mm-hmm.
to help us, right? Because we are uh, definitely overrepresented in those in those roles. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where the industry is headed. And for a frontline careers perspective, our goal is to be known as the authority on frontline work culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like to have our badge, that certification to represent and become the known standard for this truly is a place that will invest in and they value their frontline workers. They provide
Mm-hmm.
long-term opportunities to their frontline workers. Because if you look at it, especially when we talk about us, we're overrepresented there, but then you start walking it up the organization. I tell you about, I was trying to be the first black VP in operations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, running an area, a large area, at least in their current design. The truth is, it's not just there. It's many different places where it's a lot of us on the front line, but for some reason, there's a drop off as you go up, right? So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things we look at is that longer term opportunity, the demographics of the company, and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
as there's a greater shift towards the quality of jobs, long term opportunity in these jobs, that bodes well for us from a company standpoint, but also it bodes well for our community because we are so heavily represented in frontline roles across this country.
Nice. Love that. Um, and then last question, what projects are you currently working on? I know the book is one of them. So let's reemphasize the book because we're gonna hold you accountable. We need and
Please
want
do.
this book. Uh,
Please do.
and where can people find you?
So that you heard, that the book is one project. Another project we're working on is called, and they're in the works, is Tales from the Frontline. So our
Mm-hmm.
own podcast, right? I can't take credit for that title. The creative side, that's all Ty, as you know. Love the title of that. But the idea being, let's feature conversations, like the conversations that we've had, tons of them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because our primary customer is the frontline worker. Why not feature their stories? Hear directly
Mm.
from them,
Yeah.
right? Hear directly from, don't hear it from me secondhand. Hear from them. Let them tell you why they don't want to go there. Let them tell you
Mm-hmm.
why they stay where they're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let them continue, give them the platform so that they can be um, uh, their own mouthpiece. We just help to amplify it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would say where you can find me is, Jason at frontlinecareers.com, email. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find us on our company page too. You can find out more information about our certification. Again, that's the Frontline Friendly Workplace certification and our exclusive job site. You can find out more about that at frontlinecareers.com.
Love it, love it. Make sure you all tap into Jason, what he's doing. He is looking to amplify the voices of these frontline workers, just as we're amplifying, Pan Africans all across the world doing amazing things like Jason is doing. And I can't wait to share more of that too. I might have to see if I get Jason involved in our Run the Receipts campaign because, Run the Receipts is all about doing that. All these companies that pledge to really invest in black communities since the passing of George Floyd. What are you doing? What are you doing to be successful? How are you tapping into the community? If you're not working with brothers like Jason, then you're not doing it right. And we are here to help you in this fight. So come and work
Amen.
with
Yep.
us and let's see how we can get things done. Jason, it's been a pleasure, my brother. Thank you for your words of
Thank you,
wisdom,
man.
for your
This is a great
blessings.
conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
I I knew it was going to be a great conversation. I just needed to get you on.
Sorry it
um,
took a while, but man, I'm glad we connected and we made it happen. And look forward to doing it again.
that it was perfect timing because, like I said, like we said in the episode, Mental Health Awareness Month. So, what better time for us to engage in conversation? And I look forward to keeping the conversation going with you in many different ways. Congrats to the process of writing the book, the podcast, and the success you've had in your business. And we will catch you the next time. I know this won't be the last time.
Absolutely. Thanks, my brother.
Thank you. All right, everybody.
All
That's
right. You
another
have a good
episode
one.
of Rise Urban Nation. Jason, don't go nowhere. And we'll catch you on the next time.